Offengawi and Little, Hastings, overlap, Madden, Naden, Mamala, diving for the corner. It's a photo finish. The Tigers are sprinting from everywhere.
Olympic Park in Melbourne at the moment. The one with Matt Adamson. Well, here's Gareth Ellis. Dane Laurie's on his inside. Can he draw the fullback? And that will be the most, well, that's the number one bomb try of all time.
This is Liam Fulton in 12. Big sidestep from the second rower, and he will go all the way.
Hello and welcome to the West Tigers podcast. This is episode number 293. Eddie Otto joined by Declan McCutcheon and Gary Watson. Welcome, boys. It's been a while. I had a look back, and I think it's been about 3 months, Gary, since I've been on the podcast. I was threatening not to come back to February, but, you know, Joel's the boss, so here I am. I'm back.
What I find interesting that Joel's not on tonight, is there something going on between the two of you? Joel's on, you're not on, now you're back, like and Joel's disappeared.
Declan, it's a bit like Sheens and Benji. It's a bit of a power struggle maybe between me and Joel.
Yeah. It's interesting to see who's got the power there. But yeah, it's good to see you back. I'm excited to hear all your takes because you've had some red hot takes in the group chat. So hopefully some of those make their way onto the pod tonight for the listeners.
You will have to listen to find out. Gary, I did say, you know, soon after the season finished that I'm not going to be following anything because I just needed a mental rest more than anything of just, you know, the West Tigers. And to be honest, the only updates I've got is through listening to our podcast. I think you guys have done probably about 3 in the last couple of months, or through asking questions, sometimes cheekily on the group chat. But I have tried not to follow any of the news the past few months because I just wanted a bit of a break from it. I know you're the opposite.
Do you think our listeners are going to notice a difference, Eddie? Like, do you think they'll see a difference in your knowledge?
Well, that's up to them to find out. I have done 20 minutes of research before this podcast, Gary, which is 20 more minutes than you did, apparently. So, Declan, yes?
Yeah, and for anyone that is curious, Eddie hasn't been on the pod because he's actually been studying crypto. So if you have any crypto questions, please just direct all your questions to Eddie. Or you can direct.
He's actually a crypto expert now. Crypto expert. I think he can make us all rich.
If you do still have my old Facebook, please don't be fooled by that Nigerian hacker that's got the better of me. He's still at large at the moment, Gary. So if you can report him on Facebook, that'd be good because, yeah, it's not been good. It's not been fun. Anyway, boys, let's get stuck in tonight because we're going to spend the first half talking about the independent review. It's all gone quiet, but we expect something to come out perhaps before Christmas. We'll talk about Jerome Luai, the latest there. There's some other player murmurs, movement potentially happening. And maybe if we get time, we'll talk a little bit about Benji Marshall's first pre-season and first season in charge coming up in a couple of months. But I want to reference just a couple of latest articles, boys, that I found in relation to the independent review commissioned by the Holman Barnes Group. Andrew Webster, chief reporter for Sydney Morning Herald on November 27. He said this is the next 2 weeks is the most important 2 weeks in the history of the West Tigers. The findings from the independent review were presented sometime last week. Lee Hadjiban tell us he felt that the review was perhaps to push him out, but what Andrew Webster is surmising through talking to his sources on condition of how do you say that word? In condition of that they don't talk about it, that the review is a recommendation more so for the Holman Barnes Group to step back in terms of their control and not so much focus on Lee. And it was some of the findings, apparently, this is according to Andrew Webster, revolve around more about the entire board and structure of the club, and less so about perhaps individuals sit beneath them. The final board meeting before Christmas, we believe, is December 12. Andrew Webster says the Holman Barnes Group should accept the recommendations and take action. He goes on to say the only way Benji Marshall won't become cannon fodder is if they do that. Holman Barnes holds 4 of the 7 directors on the board currently, and that, I believe, is from a small pool of their 143 members. He finishes the article by saying, "It's time to draw a line in the quicksand, and the Holman Barnes Group are the only ones that can do that." The other article I'm going to reference was last week on Fox, so more the News Limited stuff, and it said much the same, that the latest update on the review reportedly recommended that the directors who commissioned it, being Holman Barnes guys, step down. Lee Hadjibentelis, who's one of the 3 independent directors, could also make way in a major reshuffle of governance. There are concerns if he steps down, according to the article, that his $1 million a season Brighton's sponsorship could go out the door with him. And perhaps the stakeholders have the power to remove directors. So, Gary, I'll start with you. I'll go back to Andrew Webster's first 2 sentences. Is this the most important couple of weeks in the history of the West Tigers?
If you take out the 2005 run to the grand final premiership, 100%. I think at the moment we're right at a spot where we have a chance to set our club up for the next 25 years. I think we can get the structures right in our club. We can make significant changes to the organisational structures of our club that will set us up long term. I think most of our listeners will agree, and most of the people that sign the petition because they're not happy with the direction of the club at that governance level. And listening to you talk about Andrew Webster's article, he's talking about the change I think most of us want to see. And it's heartening that that's starting to make its way out into the media, that we're looking at having significant governance change and the makeup of our board is looking to change. That's all really heartening. But the recommendations is only one part of it. It being recommended is fantastic, but the important part now is that the Holman Barnes Group take that on and implement those recommendations, because there's no point getting the review done and getting these recommendations if we just sit back and brush them under a carpet or don't take them seriously. And that's where we are now, and I think that's what the Holman Barnes Group is working through at the moment. I think they're still processing those recommendations and how to go about implementing them. So I think they get a little bit more time to try and work out how they're best going to implement these changes, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks, hopefully definitely before Christmas, we hear that there's going to be some major changes at our club, because I think it will make a huge difference. And as I said at the start, it has the opportunity to set this club up for the next 25 years.
Just before I go to you, Declan, Gary, an important question, because obviously Holman Barnes Group were the commissioners of the review, but we did start the petition back in, I don't know when it was, July or August. Have you had any information from the guys on Holman Barnes in terms of an update of where things are at currently?
Yeah, my understanding is, as I said a moment ago, is they're processing through those recommendations. It is a complicated issue because it's a major structural change to the club. So I wouldn't expect them to get those recommendations and then be announcing the next day. So that's where I believe they're at the moment. I believe they're going through that process of making those decisions about whether they're going to implement those changes and then putting the changes in place. So I think they deserve that time to kind of get that sorted, and hopefully that we hear something back from the club very soon about them actually implementing those changes, and it not just disappearing or not just going quiet, because as I said, this is a real opportunity to fix this club for us.
It was an interesting article, Declan, by Andrew Webster, because I know there was a previous one in News Limited by David Riccio calling, podcasters and running the club, and had a very different take. What did you make of Webster's take?
I mean, I tend to think that Sydney Morning Herald journalists are a little bit more moderate than News Corp journalists. So from that perspective, I think he raises a few more valid points. Obviously, the Dave Recchio piece had a little bit of unflattering things to say about us, and he's entitled to his opinion. But yeah, I think it's fair to say we disagree with a lot that was written in that article. But yeah, I think it's I do remember reading it, but it was a while ago. Like, it came out last week, was it? But yeah, probably echo everything Gary says. Like, yes, it's very important. Might be a little bit dramatic saying it's the most important 2 weeks in West Tigers history, but yeah, I think that there's some real need for change at board level, and hopefully this is a sign that that's going to be not only listened to but implemented by the shareholders of the West Tigers.
One of the big problems I have in the club is that inability for there be a mechanism for change at board level. If there's a poorly performing board, there's nothing in our club that can change it. That board just sits there for as long as it wants to sit there. And that was one of the pleasing things that Andrew Webster mentioned, is that with the Holman Barnes group taking a step back and not being on the board themselves, if they're appointing independent directors to that board, that allows them to become that mechanism that if the club is performing poorly, there's a mechanism there for change at the club. And it's not something where we have to fight for that change, which is what we've been doing for the last 6 months now. It becomes something where, as a fan base, you can go to the Holman Barnes group, say we're unhappy, and they can then implement that change. That's why it sets us up for the future, not just because we're going to change the board now. It puts in place a mechanism for the board to be changed when it's performing poorly. And at the moment, we don't have that. And I think that's the most dangerous thing in our club, is that there's no mechanism for change at that level. And my hope is that this process creates that mechanism.
This report is true, or some of it true, Declan, and that is presented on December the 12th. How receptive do you think Holman Barnes may be with that? Because a lot of, I suppose, fans, and I suppose just rugby league fans, probably think, maybe out of this review, it may be the end of a Lee Hadjipantelis or Justin Pascoe, but this sort of hints that structural board changes could be on the table. Do you think that's a good thing, and do you think they will be receptive of that?
Yeah, I think we've said for a long time, I think there needs to be some rejuvenation at that level, and hopefully this is kind of the step that actually confirms that for the club. But like, you'd have to think that they're receptive to it, otherwise what was the point of commissioning the review if they weren't going to listen to it? Like, obviously some people were saying that it's kind of just like a PR thing to make it look like they're doing something, but I'd like to think that that's not true, and that there's actually a genuine attempt to look inwards from an outside perspective, which is why they got someone who's independent of the West Tigers to come and have a look and see what's wrong. So you would like to think that they are sincere in this review, and that they'll take on to the best of their ability the opinion and the outcomes of the review. And
going again off the Andrew Webster article, if those recommendations that he was speaking about, those outcomes he was talking about, if they're what's recommended, then I think it shows that the review process itself and the people conducting the review have done it in a way that they're not just there as patsies of the club, that they're there to recommend what they see as beneficial change moving forward, despite it being hard on the people who commissioned the report. Now, where we're at now is, I think Holman Barnes Group, because they commissioned the report, because they listened to what the fan base was saying and put this external review in place, because they've done that, I think they deserve a little bit more time. I think I said it on the last pod. I think they deserve a little bit of time to show that they're going to take this up. And if they're taking time to work out how to implement this, then I think that's great. What we do need is sometime in December, we need to hear something and about what's going on. And that's the next step. If we're getting towards the end of December and we're not hearing what's happening at the club in regards to the findings of this review, that's when as a fan base, we need to start talking about it again, and we need to start pushing it again.
The chairman, Declan, Lee Hadjipantelis, he's not outwardly threatening, but the Fox article states that he might, take his bat and ball and go home if he is ousted as one of the 3 independent directors. What do you make of that? Should the club be concerned that, one, he may take his sponsorship with him, or is that the least of our worries at the moment?
I think obviously corporate sponsorship is really important these days in the NRL and kind of how NRL teams operate. So yes, I think it's a huge concern, but at the end of the day, this was kind of the risk you take when you appoint the major sponsor, as the chairman of the board. When you cross-pollinate and someone has 2 different hats, then this was always going to happen at some point if he wasn't doing a good job, or if the club, for whatever reason, wasn't doing well. And unfortunately, we've come to that crossroads where the club isn't doing well. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that it's because of the board, and he is chairman of the board, so naturally questions are going to be asked if he's doing a good job. And as a result of that, because he is the major sponsor, he's probably not going to be happy, and that could result in us losing a fairly big sponsorship. But again, I think it just goes back to the people who decided to let him be the chairman and the major sponsor, and I think it's 100% their fault that we're in this situation right now, because any one of us could have seen this is a pretty reasonable risk that could have occurred, and I think that's why you don't give someone that much power within your club in 2 different roles.
Yep, to me it just highlights the conflict of interest of having your major sponsor as your chairman. I think just these reports are evidence enough that we can't have our major sponsor as our chairman. If every time we're looking at doing something that our chairman doesn't like or removing him, that he's threatening to take his sponsorship away, that's the worst case scenario you can be in with a sponsor. It's just crazy, and to me that highlights one of the major problems that we have at a governance level at our club, and it's time to fix that. If there are any veiled threats that he's going to take his sponsorship away because of losing the chairmanship, then that's grounds to me for losing the chairmanship. It's just a crazy situation to be in, and I can't imagine many other clubs getting themselves in that situation. It's just ridiculous.
I do believe, Gary, I could be wrong, we did, as a podcast group, reach out to Dave Riccio after his article. I don't believe he replied. Is that right?
No reply at all.
No reply. I mean, obviously, it's fairly common knowledge, I think, that Lee likes to dine with some of those reporters and even ask for their opinion. And some of those long lunches at Grappa, I mean, they might be heavily affected for Mr. Dave Riccio. So I do feel for him in that regard, Declan. But I guess no surprise that he didn't reply.
Yeah, I think it probably says a lot about him as a journalist that not only did he not reply, but he didn't really reach out to any of us, to my knowledge, and ask what our opinion it was of the whole situation, which I thought was kind of 101 with journalism, but I suppose I'm wrong. But yeah, maybe we should send someone to Grappa as kind of an inside person to work the tables. We might get some inside information about who's there and what they're talking about.
Well, not far from where I live, in Grappa restaurant. I have been there once or twice before, not with Lee or Dave Riccio though, Gary. It is a nice place. But let's.
I thought maybe that was why you were away, Eddie. They got to you and kind of brought you into the fold by taking you out and whining and dining.
I saw Steve or Joel had rumours that I was in some foreign country with Pasco, and that might have been you actually, but that's all false. I've just been working, not working. I've been just doing my cricket on the weekend. I've been just trying to get away from the West Tigers, but this review is ongoing. Gary, would you expect to hear something before Christmas? And is silence at the moment a good thing, the fact we're not hearing much, or is it an ominous thing the longer it goes?
It's really hard to tell.
Change. I'm saying, most of us want change, or we all want change on this podcast. I don't pretend to speak for every fan, but for the fans that do want change at a board level and perhaps below that, is silence a good thing at the moment?
It's really hard to tell because I think the leaking from the club has eased up quite considerably in the last 6 months. So it's probably just part of that because our club would have board meetings in the past, and then within 24 hours, you're kind of hearing about it in the media, and that doesn't seem to be happening at the moment. I expect to hear something during December. I want to hear something during December, at least some kind of update, even if it's the club coming out and saying, look, we've got the recommendations, we're implementing the recommendations, we're just taking time to plan out how we're going to implement them. All that sort of stuff, that's fine. That's an update, and I think it shows that the club's moving in the right direction. I don't think this can go into January without an update from the club. And I know as the podcast, we're going to be speaking more to the club, and we're going to be asking for an update. So I expect that there will be some kind of update, hopefully to the wider fan base sometime during December, because, yeah, as I said, I think flowing into January, it's really taking it a little bit too far. And the update doesn't have to be what the changes are. It's just that we're an update about where they're at if they are processing through it.
Declan, are you overall feeling optimistic that there will be changes? Do you feel there'll be some sort of watered down compromise in this, that maybe Lee or Justin will be the scapegoat and the board directors will stay, or it's too hard to predict at the moment?
I think it's too hard to predict at the moment. I just think that individuals who, like, for whatever reason, haven't really, like, put their hand up and taken accountability in the past, I can't really see why this time would be any different, if that makes sense. And I think we're going to see a lot of kind of like running for shelter and kind of like saving themselves in terms of people if they get thrown under the bus. And I think it's interesting that there was like articles about a Tigers civil war not that long ago, and it's kind of died down, but I still think that could be on the horizon, especially someone like as influential as Lee gets offside with the Holman Barnes group, because he's got a lot of media influence. He's on the radio every Tuesday on SEN, and like he likes talking to the journalists, and I think this could get like pretty ugly pretty quickly if someone like him is put offside.
One major thing I do want to see come out of this is that the recommendations from this review are released in full. And if there are compromises made, then those compromises are explained why we're going that direction. I don't think this is something that you can just say, we're implementing this, this and this. I think those recommendations, they announced this review publicly. When they announced that review, they said it came about because of the petition that the fans signed that we started. So I think it's really important for those over 2,000 people that signed that petition that they are told what the recommendations from this review are. It doesn't have to be all the nitty-gritty findings and all the faults in the club and all the issues that they discovered. It doesn't have to be that. But those recommendations that have been made by the review team, I think, should be made public. And if you're not following them fully, I think the Holman Barnes group should be explaining why they're not following them fully.
This might be a unfair question, but I'm going to ask you both anyway. I don't want, this is not a witch hunt. I think we've said from the start, this is not about one person. But Declan, what would be changes that you would prefer that would have more impact? Would that be changes at CEO and chairman level, or would that be changes at board level? Obviously, I think you want both, but which would be more beneficial for West Tigers?
I do think that, I like to just reiterate that, it's not a witch hunt. We don't want any, one person in particular because we don't like them. We just want what's best for the club. We're all here because we love the West Tigers, but I think that the board does need a general sweep. I don't think that just getting rid of Pascoe and Lee will suddenly save us from all our problems. I think there needs to be quite widespread change on that board with fresh ideas and kind of fresh mindsets. And I don't think it's just their fault that we're in the position we're in. So I'll probably say I would like to see just more of a change in the boardroom overall in terms of who takes up those seats rather than just getting rid of two people.
Gary, like we said before, we never doubted the people are working in the best interests. It's just that what they've been doing hasn't been working. And I know you've worked with some of the guys we've mentioned, and I've met them, and I even met a couple of weeks ago just through cricket a couple of guys that sit on that West Tigers board, and they've worked hard for West Cricket Club as well. But where do you sit on that question? What do you think would be more effective? A chairman and CEO changes or board changes? Everything I'm sure you're going to say, but what do you reckon?
For me, it's the structural changes. So it's the changes about who we're appointing to the board, how we're appointing those people to the board. I want a situation where we don't have the Holman Barnes Group appointing themselves as directors. I want a situation where we have a mechanism for a poorly performing board to be replaced or changed up or change to happen in that area. So to me, it's not about the individuals at all. It's about removing the conflicts of interest that we have in the club through our structure of our club. So having our major sponsor as the chairman, having people voting themselves into positions on our board, and separation between the Holman Barnes Group board and the West Tigers board, I think is crucial. And having it so that we don't have someone sitting on both those boards. So our majority owner doesn't have to make a decision to sack themselves from the West Tigers board in the future. These are the things I want to see change. So it's not about the people involved. It's about the processes and the structure around how our board's made up, how our board members are decided. And that's what's important to me moving forward, more so than the individuals involved.
Obviously, Declan, Christmas will be here before we know it, and then you're into almost trial games at the back end of January. Does this sort of thing, if it carries over, have the ability to derail Benji Marshall's first season? I think we're all a little bit worried for him, the position the club's been in the last couple of years with this in the background at the moment.
I don't really think that players particularly care about this sort of stuff. I think that, if they're happy in training and they win games, then this is kind of, irrelevant. Like, I think the media might make it into a bigger story than it is, but I just can't see the players particularly caring what goes on in the boardroom, because I wouldn't even be surprised if they were oblivious to it completely. But I could be wrong. But yeah, I don't think it will. I don't think this process happening will make the team any worse than what they would have already been without the review, if that makes sense.
What does it look like, Gary, if there are changes? It's probably another podcast episode, that question. But I suppose no one can guarantee we're going to be better off. But what we do know is that 24 years in, what we're doing is clearly not working.
Yeah, for me, it's about setting us up with the best chances to be successful. And to me, that's kind of what I've been speaking about the majority of this time. It's about setting up a situation where we don't have that crossover board, where the Holman Barnes Group are appointing directors, but they're independent directors. They're not people associated with the Holman Barnes Group or West Ashfield. And to me, that's what a successful board kind of looks like. It gives that mechanism for change, and that allows them to make the decisions about how to run or who runs our football club in a manner that's going to be successful. And that's what's important for me, because I've lost trust in this club. That's why we organised a petition. And I think, speaking to a lot of fans, reading lots of comments on the forums and out on social media, there's a large percentage of our fan base that has lost trust with the club. And I think this is the only way to kind of win that trust back.
Just sticking with you, Gary, for a sec, you mentioned speaking to fans. Is there anything over the next few weeks? I don't want to tell fans what to do. They're all entitled to do exactly what they want and feel how they want. But is there anything over the next few weeks that fans should be looking out for, or just your own approach? What are you doing? Are you just purely waiting for those recommendations to come out and then react accordingly?
Yeah, as I said, I expect in the next couple of weeks to hear something from the club, an update on where they are at it with it. I think that's what everyone should kind of do, is wait for that update and give the club. Now, I want to say, the Holman Barnes Group deserves credit still. They implemented, they called for this review. So I think they deserve the time to get this right. And if they want to hold off on making an announcement until they have it right, I get that 100%. But I think something needs to be announced in December. I think there needs to be some kind of communication with the fan base about where we're at. And I think that our fan base should give the Holman Barnes Group that little bit of extra time to get ready for that. And then if we don't hear something in the next couple of weeks, that's when we start to talk again. That's when I believe we're going to start talking about it again and pushing it a little bit harder. And that's when the questions need to be asked. That's when all those Facebook groups with actions about what to do, that's when that's going to become really important. But I think it's really important because the Holman Barnes Group commissioned this report that they get the opportunity to respond to it. I think they deserve that, and that they've got a couple of weeks to kind of get that.
Okay, we'll wait and see, and no doubt we will do a special podcast if there are any findings to come out of that before Christmas. All right, Declan, that's my 20 minutes of notes out the window there. That's my 20 minutes of preparation. That's done. So now I'm going to be paddling a little bit because I haven't done much West Tigers research the last few months, but I do believe we're after a bloke called Jarome Luai. Is that right?
I haven't really heard too much about it. Gary, have you heard anything? Apparently he's pretty good.
Apparently.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
I don't really know him. There hasn't been anything in the news about it, and it's not like our fan base hasn't been talking about it at all.
So, Declan, you know, the Moses was a saga, and the longer it went on, I started to drive you crazy and Gary crazy because my percentage just kept dropping down to about 1%. We won't start with a percentage, but that's a warning to Gary. We are going to finish with a percentage. It looks like a three-way race. Penrith, apparently, he gets back to Penrith training, I believe, this week. At this stage, I believe they've offered him 2 years, around $850K. Tigers, apparently, 4 years, around 1.1 million, maybe a fraction more than that. He's also apparently met with Phil Gould. The Penrith CEO, Matt Cameron, he said he was optimistic they'll get a deal done. Do you think that's just Penrith just trying to control the narrative? Where do you sit on your Luai meter at the moment?
Look, I'll be lying if I said I was confident. I don't want to be that person that just comes on the pod and spews negativity because, you know, we have enough of that when the Tigers play in the actual season. So I do want to be positive, but I think, as you said, it's just really hard to be positive in these kind of situations. When we had the Trail saga, we had the Moses saga, whenever these like big, long contract negotiations tend to drag on, like we more often than not get used as a mechanism for the player to kind of get more money out of the club they want to stay at. Now, I can't say for sure that I know for a fact that that's what Jerome's doing, but I wouldn't be surprised if like he's just trying to get more out of Penrith and this is like the mechanism to do that for his agency. Now, like he could still come to the Tigers. I would be quite surprised because, you know, these things don't often happen, but for us, I do think that we'll up our offer to 5 years, and I think Penrith will also up their offer to 3 years. So like it just depends on what he's after. But yeah, I'm not feeling confident at the moment. There's all this talk that, you know, he might have signed or he might have agreed to sign like last week, and the whole like 10-day period where Penrith had the right of reply to offer him another contract. Some people think that that's happening. I just don't see it. I think that if that was the case, it would have leaked to the media by now. So we're just going to have to wait and see. But I think, Eddie, you said in the group chat, I think the longer this goes on, like the less confident I am that anything's going to eventuate from it. But at least I would say with this, at least if we don't end up with Luai, we do have, you know, Bud Sullivan still, and Latu Fainu. So it's not the end of the world, I suppose, if we miss out on him like we did with Mitchell Moses.
Just to digress, Gary, Declan just said he doesn't want to be that person that comes on the podcast and spews negativity. Was that a backhanded shot at me, or was that a shot at Joel or Steve? I'm trying to work out who that was.
Yeah, who is that person, Declan?
It's just open to interpretation. Like if you think it's you, then I think that says more about you than it does about me. But, you know,
very much open to interpretation. All right, Gary, Jarome Luai. I think my interactions on the chat have been percentage meters. You know, a couple of weeks ago I came out and said I'm confident this might happen because I think it's a bit of bluffing for Penrith. I don't think they have a real intent to drive the price for Jerome Luai up or the years up. But again, the longer it goes on, the more it starts to reflect for me what happened with Mitchell Moses. Was once it dragged into January and February, you just knew he was leveraging for every last dollar out of Parramatta. Where do you see it sitting at the moment?
Yeah, I am similar to you, Eddie. I look at a lot of the reporting coming out of Penrith, and to me, it does show signs that they may be trying to get the story to the narrative that they want it to be if he does leave. So I think there is a fair chance he leaves Penrith. I think in all these situations that the most likely outcome is most of these players re-sign with the club that they're at. It's not that often big-name players switch clubs. But this may be one of those situations where it's a little bit different. I can see the reasons why he may want to move on. And with Penrith's success and with their setup, they do have to lose high-quality players quite regularly just because of the juniors they got coming through, and they're now on the back of three back-to-back premierships. And they have lost a few players over the last couple of years, some high-quality players as well. So it's quite possible that this is part of that process. I've got my hopes up that he'll come across. As I said, I think the news coming out of the Penrith and the stories about Penrith seem to be that situation that they tend to do, where once they know they've lost a player, they start to change the narrative. So it's about, we tried to keep him, but the money was just too large. At $1.4 million he got offered by another club. And those sort of stories that Penrith start to push in the media, there are signs that that's happening. So I do have my hopes up a little bit that he's going to come across. It probably is still more likely that he stays at Penrith, as most players do. But I think we're in with a real shot.
Yeah, I think that when it was just the 2 years, which was reported at $850K, like assuming that's all accurate by reporting, and then you compare that to the 4 years, like $1.1 million deal that we were offering, you can see that there's real incentive here to leave, because that's a lot of money on the table. But I just think when they offer the third year, 3 years, $850K a year to play for Penrith, they're probably going to win a few more comps. They're going to win a lot, as opposed to going to a team at the bottom of the ladder where it is a bit of a project. We don't know how he's going to do. I just think that he really would have to be that kind of alpha male, thinks that I know I can drag these guys to the top kind of mentality, because he is from the area, he's a big ambassador for the Mount Druitt community, so he means a lot to Penrith. And I just if they get to that third year, I think it's going to be tough to get him away from Penrith.
To me, and this is to me personally, and I know you don't agree with it, Declan, but I think that third year doesn't overly improve that deal. I think the $850 to $900,000 mark that they're talking about Penrith paying for him, that's unders. He's worth more than that. And to me, that locks him into an extra year at a salary that is below what he should be earning. And yes, he gets the kind of security around having that extra year, but he can get an extra year on top of that as well of security at a higher money value by moving clubs. And it's not necessarily just the Tigers, but to the Bulldogs or to another club. So, yes, that extra year could possibly be seen as a positive, but I can see it as a negative as well, because it does lock him in at that under market value for an extra year. Whereas a 2-year contract at Penrith means he can possibly be negotiating for an increase on that after 2 years.
But I think that if he signs with Penrith, then it's just it's an indication that he's willing to put on-field success over monetary value, because obviously he'd get more money for with us, and then I just don't I don't know. It's just it's tough because you don't actually know what. There's all this media speculation, but we don't really know at the end of the day what Luai values, because there's all that talk about he wants to be the main guy, he wants to play 7, he wants to kind of grow outside of Cleary's shadow. But at the end of the day, we don't know if he's just leveraging us to get more from Penrith.
Yeah, without knowing what his motivation is, then it's really hard to kind of tell. If his motivation is to win multiple more premierships, then he's going to give up the money and he's going to stay at Penrith. If his motivation's to continue to play with his mates that he grew up with playing, then he's going to stay at Penrith and probably take less money. If his motivation's to get out of that Cleary shadow, as you mentioned a moment ago, Declan, then he needs to move to do that. There's never going to be a time at Penrith where he is that number one guy for more than a short period of time while Cleary's injured. Cleary isn't leaving that club. So if he wants to forge his own path, then he's going to have to leave. If he wants the bigger money with the squad that Penrith's got, then he's going to have to leave. It all comes down to what his motivation is, and no one can really know what that is. Like, we can all sit here and guess what we think it might be, but his motivation's really, really personal, and that's what's going to make the difference here. It's going to be that motivation about what he wants from the next 5 years of his football career.
He is 27, Declan. I believe he's got 3 kids, and I think he's from Mount Druitt, so probably grew up fairly poor. So if you're listening to the podcast, Jerome, you've also got a coach, Ivan Cleary, who I don't think he rates you very highly. He's had some bizarre comments about him not stepping up.
Quite disrespectful.
Well, I mean, it's totally in line with Ivan Cleary to be disrespectful because, I mean, he showed his class again after winning a 3rd comp in a row in a couple of speeches he had after the grand final, which is no surprise. That's what he's like, which is funny because Nathan comes across as actually quite humble and a good winner, which Ivan is not. But I won't make it about Ivan. But surely I found that bizarre, Declan. I found that almost like, unless that's some sort of in-joke, if I was Lou, I'd be looking at that and go, okay, really?
Well, yeah, there's no doubt that I think that's kind of what intrigued all of us, especially last week and the week before, is that Penrith were kind of, looking from the outside, they were kind of preparing, like massaging the story to make, he kind of just wants to leave for the money. Like, if you look at Greg Alexander on SEN, like, he did not seem like he was confident that Luai was going to stay. He seemed like quite annoyed because they were talking about player swaps and everything. Obviously, that's probably not going to eventuate, but you could really see that Penrith were posturing that they were kind of like trying to control the reason why he was leaving was because of money and not because of anything else. But I just think that, like, all is fair in love and war and negotiations, and if they come to a deal together that Luai likes, I just think it's all going to be water under the bridge. I don't think he's particularly going to care. I think he's got a great relationship with Nathan Cleary. Like, you would assume that he's got a good relationship with Ivan Cleary because, they've won 3 premierships together. And yeah, I just think that although it's a little bit suspect and probably not how I would have handled it personally in the media, I just think that it will probably be water under the bridge if they give him what he wants.
The thing with it is, if he does sign at Penrith, Ivan Cleary is kind of right, because that's Jerome saying that he's signing up to be the sidekick to Nathan Cleary moving forward. And to me, that just kind of shows that what Cleary said about him, that he's not the guy to lead a side. It probably just proves that point. And it really comes down to the mindset and motivation of Jerome in that situation. If he's happy to play that sidekick role, then he can stay at Penrith. If he's not happy playing that sidekick role, then he needs to move and he needs to go to another club and he needs to... The thing is, the expectation at the West Tigers aren't that high. Like, most people I speak to think we're looking at the third wooden spoon in a row. So getting close to the top 8, and if he comes to our club and he gets our side after what will be 13, 14 years into the finals, then that really is an achievement. And it's almost going to be as big of an achievement as winning the premiership. You don't get the same accolades for it, but it's a massive achievement if for those people who do eventually turn this club around and get it into finals football again.
Declan, if he was to come across, where would you be playing him? Would you be telling him it's your team, you're the number 7, or would you be still looking at those halves this year and working it out from there where he plays?
Yeah, I'd probably like to see how the halves form this year, because someone like Jayden Sullivan has a gun year at 7, and if he plays 7, then you probably put him at 6 with Luai obviously probably being the chief playmaker. But then if someone like Latu Finu comes in and just absolutely blitzes it, then you would put Luai at 7. I know there's a lot of people talking about how they don't think Luai is the 7. I tend to disagree. I was looking back at his debut game against the Warriors where Nathan Cleary wasn't playing and he was a 7. And granted, it only was one game, but I think the reason why, he doesn't look that involved in Penrith's attack is because that's his role within the team. I think he averages the least amount of touches for any 5'8" in the competition. So obviously Nathan Cleary is, controlling the ball. He's got the most touches in the team by far, and that makes sense for their system. But I think he's got the talent to be able to transition to a team that's kind of built around him, where his touches will increase. I think his productivity will also increase. But yeah, in terms of who partners him, I just think that it needs to be the best player out of the 3 young guns that we've got coming through, and Lachlan Galvin, Jaden Sullivan and Latu Finu. And I think that's a great position for us to be in, because when you're looking at the team and you're kind of hoping for 2 kind of inexperienced players to like kick on instead of 1, I would rather pair 1 with a veteran playmaker like Luai.
7 or 6, Gary?
I think if you're looking at that $1.1 to $1.2 million mark, then you're signing him to play 7. I think if he's coming across to step out of the shadow, then he needs to be playing 7. So for me, it's crucial that Benji Marshall works out whether he believes he has that ability to transform into a number 7, because the money you're looking at, the reasons for him coming across, I think you have to play him at 7.
Percentage, Declan? I sort of, you can say no comment if you want, Gary. I was over 50% a couple of weeks ago, but when I heard poor old Lee on the radio, I thought, this is the death knell. So I'm down around 30%. I actually think he will leave Penrith, but I think Canterbury might have, they've got that Penrith connection there, probably more so than we do. We've got some Penrith connection, but I think it's going to be us or the Bulldogs.
Yeah, I'm around that 30%, 35% mark. As I said, I think it's more likely that he stays at Penrith because that's what most of these players sort of do. But I do think if he does come across, I think we're a better landing spot for him than the Bulldogs.
Declan's Bulldogs. They've been on a recruitment drive. I think they've recruited 8 number 14s. Declan's very exciting going into next season. The Bulldogs.
Yep, my Bulldogs. I'm very excited to see them play. Well, if someone goes injured, they'll have like 5 different options to replace them in the half. So,
boys, there was a bit of a mail, might have been fake mail, that potentially Luai could be offered up for next season if we were to give them David Klemmer and one of our young guns, Lachlan Galvin. Gary, you were dead against that, I think.
We need to start improving our squad. We don't have enough first-grade players to be giving them away. So we need to keep the first-grade players we have and add to it with guys like Jerome Luai.
Is it a worry, Declan, when these sharp clubs like Penrith and Melbourne and Roosters sort of get involved, with things like that? It looks good because it might give us the upper hand if there's some sort of trade, but maybe they're leaving anyway a year later.
I mean, yeah, I think it's always tough, isn't it? Because on one hand, I think in particularly with Lachlan Galvin, you've got a player. He was he won the GIO Schoolboy Player of the Year, so he's the best high school player in the country. He's a great young player, and he could kick on to be anything. So you don't want to give up that risk. And but then on the other hand, we did turn down a trade for Josh Adokar, and all we had to give up was Tommy Talau. And to be fair, if you put yourself in our shoes when that happened, Tommy Talau, he did have a little bit of upside. He did have that pedigree about him. So these young players, they can kind of go either way, and it's difficult to tell. The only people that can really tell are the people seeing them train at the moment. So guys like Benji Marshall, they would know for a fact, this is the kind of potential that someone like Lachlan Galvin has. So I'm happy to trust in the club's judgment in this one, because they're the ones that see them every day train. But in saying that, I don't think the rumour is true, because I think the Mo at the best of times is a little bit questionable from the rumours he has, and I think that Danny Wilder and Michael Chamis on their podcast, said that they didn't think it was true, and they're also Fairfax media journalists who work for the same company as the Mole, and if they're saying it's not true, then it's probably not true, because I think they've probably got better sources than the Mole at the moment.
Yeah, I think the Mole is one of the worst sources in the game, so I take everything he has to say with a grain of salt. I'd actually rather take Eddie's advice on that sort of stuff, and Eddie had us losing Charlie Staines on our last pod, so...
I like Charlie Staines, Gary. I didn't want us to lose Charlie Staines.
You had him gone, though.
Well, I was worried. I was worried he was going to go because he wasn't at pre-season day one, and then there was no news about him re-signing. And what I found bizarre was that no other clubs were in for him. But I am glad, I am happy that he has stayed. Addin Fonua-Blake, Declan, he's the big fish on the market for 2025. He's coming back to Sydney. The noise around Clemmer's been fairly constant, given his I think 3 years left on his deal. I'm sure that would probably be the only reason you would accept losing someone like David Clemmer if you manage to snare the big Warriors prop.
Yeah, I think so. I think David Clemmer, he has a mutual option for 2025 and 2026, so it's not exactly a 3-year deal, like signed, sealed, and delivered. So I can understand like you don't want to get rid of him because he did have a good season, but at the same time, I think it's fair to say that he's not like one of the premier props in the game anymore. That sounds harsh because I honestly thought every week he tried his hardest for us, and he gave us some really good productivity, especially at the start of the season when we couldn't score a try to save our life. Every game he showed up. So if we fix the half situation, that could all improve. But I think if you've got the chance to have Addin Fonua-Blake in the team, he's a clear upgrade. Yes, he's going to cost us, but he is one of the genuinely the best props in the game, and I think that if you can get him, you just got to pull the trigger on it. And if that means letting go of Clemmer, I think you've just got to do it. And honestly, I'd be looking to keep Clemmer 2 more years max anyway, and then I think you'll probably see a decline in his performance. Maybe we might even see it towards the end of next year anyway. So if we can get someone like Addin Fonua-Blake, I think it's a clear win for the club.
It is a win, and it is a trade I'd make, but we need to get ourselves to a situation where we're upgrading our squad and not letting players go to get another player. We need to be adding players to our squad.
Well, Gary, I'll just jump in, Gary. I mean, there were reports, obviously the Warriors are looking for compensation, so they're looking for a player of equal quality, perhaps not in the exact same position, but Isaiah Papali'i, he was linked to the Warriors, I believe, last year. Is that a trade you would be willing to look at, or do you think, is that to your point of, you're not actually gaining to your squad, you're adding one and losing one?
It's a trade I'd look at because I think Fonua-Blake's the type of player we do need to get into our squad. But it's not a trade I want to make. So I would reluctantly do something like that. But I want to see us get to a position where we're building our squad by adding players and releasing players who are below standard, not having to release who's a high-quality performer who has won a second rower of the year in the NRL to strengthen ourselves in the prop position. I want to see us strengthening and building our roster and not letting go of the quality players that we do have in our roster.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird, the Warriors article, because they said that they would let Addin Fonua-Blake pick which club he wanted to go to, and then they would negotiate a player swap. But wouldn't it make more sense for it to be the opposite, where they'll negotiate a player swap with the team, whoever gives them the best deal, then they'll release them for Addin Fonua-Blake to sign with? So I just don't understand, from their point of view, why would you let them choose, and then you're kind of limiting what you can get in return? But I don't know, it's just weird. But yeah, with Isaiah Papali'i, he's a great player. He tried really hard last season, but if someone like Samuel Efanu kind of comes into the team and takes that second row spot, he suddenly becomes a little bit expendable. But as Gary said, you'd like to keep all of them because we really do need as many first graders as possible, and hopefully Papali'i does have a better year this year in terms of how he played with the Eels more than how he played with us last year.
I think he will have a better year this year. I think the biggest problem with how he performed last year was our inability to use him in the way that Parramatta have used him in the past. And I'm hoping with better quality halves, we're going into next season with better quality halves than what we showed for the majority of the season last year, and I'm hoping that makes a difference to his game, and we're able to put him in better positions on the field to make use of his talents, because to me that was his biggest issue last year. It wasn't lack of effort, it wasn't busting his gut and having a go, it was that we didn't use him right.
I just remembered, Steve, I saw, not Steve, sorry for calling you Steve, Declan. I just remembered I saw Luke Brooks in a Manly jersey the other day, so I'm just worried. Is Steve going to come on the podcast this year, or is he doing the Manly podcast?
That's why he's not here tonight.
I think he's bought a condo in Brookville, so he's nice and close to the home games for Manly.
Okay, so thanks for your contribution, Steve. Good luck on the Manly podcast this year. Boys, if you had one Christmas present under the tree this year, Gary, would it be Jerome Luai? Would it be Fanua Blake, or would it be Justin Olam?
It's definitely not Justin Olam. The Grinch has come to my place if it's Justin Olam. Jerome Luai for me. I think he's a spine player. They're harder to get. While I do think we've improved our halves, I think similar to what I said about Mitchell Moses last year, is I think he gives our rebuild a boost. It's going to take longer if we don't sign a player like Jerome Luai. So for me, I prefer to get Jerome Luai across, but I'd love to have both. The only issue I have with Fanua Blake are the past behavioural issues, and that's a little bit of an issue for me. But I'd still like to have both of them.
Declan, your one present, would it be Luai over Fanua Blake?
Yeah, I think we talked about this in the pod a few weeks ago with Joe, and my opinion probably hasn't changed. I think if we signed him, it would just be that kind of circuit breaker. He's a class player in a really important position, and I think you need to have your best players in the spine. You have to have your highest paid players in the spine, because they touch the ball the most, and therefore they impact winning the most because they give the ball to people. So I think that Luai, although Adam Fanua Blake's a great player, I think that some quality in the spine is what we need, and I think he kind of changes the direction of the club just with his attitude as well. I think he's someone who would really embrace that kind of underdog mentality and hopefully drag the rest of the squad up with him.
And I think it makes a bigger splash in the market. Jerome being that high-profile sort of player, and not always high-profile for the right reasons. He's a very interesting sort of character. But I think that makes a bigger splash in the market, and I think he's more likely to probably attract other players to come to the club than Fanua Blake probably is. But as I said, I'd love two presents, Eddie.
Yeah, we all want two presents, but beggars can't be choosers, Gary. Declan, Adam Dooley, he hasn't been so busy on the field, but he's been busy on social media. I don't really want to talk about this because it's much to do about nothing, but do you think you'll see first grade this year at the West Tigers, Adam Dooley?
Yeah, I think he will. I think he's probably not due back until midway through the season, but I think Benji Marshall said he's probably going to come through New South Wales Cup, so I could see him having a bench spot towards the end of the year to kind of cover that utility spot. But in terms of the comments, yeah, very disappointing. I think that one, I don't agree with them at all. I think, I just think that it's just disappointing. Obviously, people have different opinions, and that's fine, and freedom of expression and everything. But I think the most disappointing thing was he did such a bad job of articulating them as well that it was just awful. But yeah, I do think we'll see him in first grade at some point this year. I don't think it'll be a major role though.
Positionally, Declan, where do you see his future lying as an NRL player now?
I think that just purely because he can play a lot of positions, I think he'll always have a role. Assuming that he comes back from his knee injury, all right, I think that he'll always have a role because he can play all those positions. But in terms of a starter, I'm not too sure. I think that he would have to have a pretty big turnaround in fortune for an NRL team to consider him as a starter. But yeah, probably that 14 role.
Gary doesn't. I mean, I don't want to kick a bloke when he's down, and I feel very sorry for him, the injuries he's had, but he just doesn't tackle him well enough to play lock. I originally thought maybe lock was his future, but we've signed 3 halves. I don't expect him to feature in the halves this year. Maybe I think the centres is probably his best bet.
It's a really difficult one because I don't. I've said it a lot of times. I've never really considered him a proper option in the halves. You're 100% right. His defence is a massive issue. For me, if he's going to prolong his NRL career, because I do think his career is at a real crossroads right now. It's a number of ACL injuries now, and I believe that to prolong his career, he needs to reinvent himself. He needs to commit to that 13 role, and he's got to work on that defence. He's got to fix that defence. He's a big enough guy that he shouldn't have the troubles he has with front-on defence. He gets caught out positionally as well, out wide at times, but in the middle he shouldn't get caught out the same way. It's the front-on defence that I have concerns about moving forward, but I do believe that if he's going to have a long-term career in the NRL moving forward, he needs to make that commitment to that 13 role and really improve defensively, because attacking-wise, I think he could make a really strong go of that ball playing 13, but he's got to fix that defence.
Yeah, I think that the most important thing for his career long term, I think, is just staying on the field. It's very hard for me to kind of make a judgment on what position he should play if he can't even stay on the field. I mean, it's tough because I'm no sports scientist, but once you do an ACL, you would imagine that it's quite likely that you're going to do it again, and that's exactly what's happened. So I think for him, priority number one is just to stay available as much as possible, and then take whatever position comes up for you. I don't think he's really got the power to choose now, and I think it's playing as a lock. I think it's just it's a big bridge to climb, because especially when you consider the fact that we've got a lot of locks coming through, guys who have played that position pretty much their entire senior footy lives, since they were 14. They're probably going to have a heads up advantage on you. And I just think, yes, it's going to be tough for him to take that position from guys like Kit Lilly, and even someone like Fanua Paul, I thought did a really good job for 13 this year for us.
The thing is, his future may not be at our club, though. So it's about making himself attractive, not just to the West Tigers, but to other clubs. I think that's why his career's at a crossroads. He needs to get back, hopefully he can, back onto the field this year. Otherwise, he's off contract at the end of next season, and it's going to be very hard for a club to take a top 30 roster spot punt on him leading into 2025 if he doesn't see much of the field in 2025. So I know I've been critical of him in the past, and I just hope he gets that opportunity this year. I hope that he gets back by the midpoint of the season and can start to show the West Tigers and other clubs that he's a proposition moving forward, because I hate to see anyone's career finish just because their body keeps breaking down.
Is there any other recruitment or retention sort of news around Declan? I've seen little bits about, potentially trying to offload Nofaluma. I mean, good luck with that, the money he's on. I'm sure we'd all probably like to see that happen. Whether it does, I'd say that's doubtful. It was obviously, Gary mentioned before, it was good to see Charlie Sains back for me. Sean Bloor seems to be on the outer. There's rumours he's already signed with another club for 2025.
Back at training this week, though.
Yeah, back at training. But where do you see him fitting in this year? Probably a bench role again, or can he push one of those forwards?
Yeah, I think it'll probably be very similar to his role this year. I think he'll probably come off the bench, play that impact prop role. He might get a gig at 12 if one of our starters isn't injured. But yeah, I think the mail is that he's, pretty much delivered to the Storm. And I think I'm actually just looking it up now, and I think he's already following them on Instagram. So there's a little bit of an investigation for you, which everyone knows we do like to do here on the podcast. So yeah, I think that he's probably already signed with Melbourne. And I think if he was to stay the year, it'd probably be the same kind of role that he did in 2023.
I really want to see him transition into that middle forward coming off the bench. I think he provides the most impact out of any of our middles when he plays that role. And I think he can do a little bit of a role coming off the bench in games and that high impact through the middle instead of playing him on the edge. I think he's a better middle than he is an edge player.
I wasn't going to mention Dane Laurie, Declan, but since you kind of brought him up there, and I thought maybe he's actually going to have our best year for us this year. The fact that he's gone back to Penrith and he's going to play for $200,000 at 5'8", maybe that could get us Luai.
I mean, maybe. Or he could, Luai could leave. We pay Luai, $1.1 million a year to play for us, and then Dane Laurie wins a comp at Penrith. Wouldn't that just be
I would
ironic?
love that.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll wear a West Tigers jersey to the celebrations after.
How many clown emojis would that be worth?
That would be very on script for what's happened at the West Tigers the last 15 years. Boys, before we wrap it up, it's Benji Marshall. The puff pieces are out in force, Gary. I have looked on the West Tigers website once or twice. Everyone's having a great preseason. They're training hard. We haven't lost a game yet. It's all sunshine and rainbows. But is there anything to be encouraged about having Benji Marshall as our head coach this year as opposed to Tim Sheens? I did read a little bit from Andrew Webster's, in the deep part of the article. He said that maybe the players have been a little bit surprised that it's not much focus apparently on game plan or anything like that. It's all about elevating standards, maybe as opposed to Sheens, who did focus on game style. Should we be encouraged by this, or is it all just pre-season puff?
I think it is pre-season puff, but I don't think anyone can deny that cultural change at our club is crucially important, and it is pleasing to see that Benji's at least trying to lift those standards at the club. What I keep coming back to on Benji Marshall is we don't know whether he can coach. I think Justin Pascoe said in an interview we did with him at an ambush event that he didn't know if he could coach. And I guess that's what we find out in the next 12 months is whether Benji has that ability to transition from what I do believe is he has a fairly good knowledge of the game. I always like listening to him analyse football on the Talking Head shows. I thought he was quite good at that. I guess we get to see in the next 12 months whether he can transfer that to other people and whether he has that ability to educate players and improve players. And that's the hope we've got is that he can do that, but I don't think anyone knows that yet.
I mean, Declan, I was listening to Trent Robinson and he was talking about, Boyd Cordner coming on board as an assistant coach, and he was sort of saying how much he's helping him at the moment, and he said he's expected to help him for the next 18 months, and that's even before he starts doing, team planning or team talk. So it's the polar opposite here. It's just, I know he had 1 year with Tim Sheens, but that was his only year of coaching, and it's pretty much in the deep end. Do you have reason to be more optimistic than last pre-season or not?
I think that I'm more optimistic this season because I think that the club has made a decision about where they there's more of I can see the path a lot clearer than I did this time last season. This time last season, I think our first our halves combination was Adam Doueihi and Luke Brooks, who in 2021 we kind of already knew what that looked like, and it probably wasn't going to make the top 8 with us. And now Adam Doueihi is obviously still at the club, but probably not in the starting team, and Luke Brooks is at Manly. So, and they've signed Bud Sullivan, Latu Fainu, they signed him on long-term contracts. So you would imagine that that's going to be part of how the Habs will shape up for the next few years. So I think I'm more optimistic because I think that the long-term plan is settled. But in saying that, with the Tigers, I think you learn to not be comfortable and to kind of always expect something to go wrong. So I'm keen to see what that will be this season.
And talking about that kind of lack of apprenticeship that he has had, there have been coaches in the past who have gone quite quickly from playing into being NRL coaches. There's been some people who have done it quite poorly, but there's been some people who have done it quite successfully. Phil Gould won a premiership very young in his coaching career. I know it was a long time ago, but I think he was the coach in '88 at the Bulldogs, and that was right after his retirement from playing. So it does happen, It doesn't happen that often, and Phil Gould is widely regarded as one of the better coaches of the last 40 years. Maybe Benji can be one of the better coaches of the next 40 years and make that transition without that kind of apprenticeship and make it successful. We just don't know at this point. And yeah, as I said, next 12 to 18 months, I think we're going to find out pretty quickly.
Okay, well, boys, it's been good to be back. I mean, Declan, my next scheduled podcast is February 27th, so I just want to wish you guys, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and Joel's going to be back for the next few. I think that's the plan, right?
Yeah, we really are carrying you, aren't we? While you take a prolonged holiday. Where can I invoice Joel? I feel like we should get more, for carrying more weight. But
Gary, any big predictions? I know it's a long time away, but I've got one prediction. I'll give you 30 seconds to think of one for you. It doesn't have to be West Tigers related. It can be anything. But I'm going to say if we don't come last this year, which I haven't really decided if I think, hand on heart, if we're going to come last, I think Canberra will come last. I think they're in for a big fall next year. They made the top 8 with a minus 100 and something differential. They won no games by more than 8 points all year. They've lost their best player, Jack Whiten, and I think they're all sick of Ricky Stewart. So I think they're going to be plummeting, and we play them in round 2. I'm going to predict we beat them in round 2, and we'll be leading the competition.
On 4 points.
I said, and I didn't get a chance to say this because I haven't been on, but well done, NRL. Well done. We gave us a round 1 bye. I say well done. That's excellent. We get another week, no stress. 2 points. You were complaining about round 1 bye. I think it's fantastic. So well done, Volandis.
I want us to be playing next week, Eddie. I'm hanging out for us to play. We now have to wait 2 weeks at the start of the season before we get our first game.
Thank God.
No, Eddie. I want to be playing in the first game.
Declan, you don't care about the round 1 bye. You'll be watching the soccer, I suppose, this time of year, won't you? You're not really a cricket fan.
Yeah, football is a bit tough this time of the year because I'm not really a night owl like you two, so I do struggle to stay awake. But yeah, I do watch a little bit. I think I watch more of the test matches. But yeah, I think having the bye in round 1, it just loses all tactical advantage because everyone should be reasonably well rested, and you'd rather those byes come middle of the season, towards the end of the season when injuries and injuries start building up and people need a break. You don't really want the round 1 when you should be at your freshest.
They did prepare well the last time they had a bye, Declan. They went to Fiji and to England and they lost 76-0. So I mean that was the last mid-season.
Eddie,
bye.
you just want to extend your holiday. Admit it. You want to take that longer break. You don't want to be on the pod. It gives you an extra week to kind of hide away from us all.
We'll soon find out, Gary. But boys, it has been fun to be back. Lots to talk about, and like I said, we will make sure if anything drops in relation to Jerome Luai or the independent review or anything West Tigers, to be back before Christmas. Thanks, boys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.